everyone, Alex and Eric at Coram Farm. We are a year 4 Oklahoma flower farm that sells retail market bouquets from a roadside stand. And today we want to talk all about tariffs. Just kidding. We're going to do our spring review.
We just got 3 lost subscribers by even mentioning the word.
I know. Everyone loved that video. So we're going to do a 2.0. No, we're going to review our spring season. We've done this each year for our 3 flower farming seasons. So now we're in our 4th. And Eric joked that it's helpful to us because it puts it on film, things that we forget when we go to plan our next year. So we like getting it recorded, but hopefully it's also helpful for you guys. You can hear our good, bad, and ugly of how things went. We're going to talk about each different flower. We're going to talk about the big flower holidays of Easter and Mother's Day, and then just general thoughts of how our spring season went, what we thought went well that we want to repeat, and then what was a big old bummer that we need to figure out and troubleshoot how to avoid next year. So we're going to start going through flower by flower first. And the first flower that blooms on our farm each year is tulips. Talk about tulips. Tulips. We have planted about 6,000 tulips. If you want to know all of our varieties, I'll do a bunch of linked videos in the description that are more in-depth follow-ups on a lot of these things. But if you want to know all our tulip varieties, I'll link that. We planted 6,000. And how did tulips go for us?
Year 1, we didn't grow tulips. Year 2, we grew them back here and some premium compost that we had bought doing this raised garden. Year 3, we had secured some lower cost mushroom compost from a mushroom farm that's in Miami, Oklahoma, a huge operation up there. So they have pretty good compost, but it's a higher salt content. So it ended up stunting some of our tulips. The Darwins were okay, but we had tried to grow some various varieties that didn't all do well. And so it ended up being a bit of a mixed bag. I think we lost a good couple thousand of them.
Yeah, it was.
So, and then year 4, we decided to try a different soil supplier. So we went with a local Tulsa soil supplier called GP Soil. So if you're in the area, GP Soils is a local family-owned small operation business, and they're excellent. They really focus on premium soil quality. So they did a wondrous job in that soil. Wouldn't say there was any soil issues this year whatsoever.
So we're going to repeat that next year.
Right. The issue that we had is just an Oklahoma issue, which is winds.
Winds.
And Darwins are really tall, and they're early. And this year has been an extraordinary year for, I would say, storms and rains and winds, including in late March, early April, just windstorms.
Just all day. Just wind all day. It'd be sunny and just wind, wind, wind.
Yeah, we had a couple days where it averaged 45 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And gusted to 70. So it was near hurricane force winds.
All day long.
With just sunny skies.
Yeah. So our
Darwins just got laid down.
They were 2 feet above the soil.
They were okay at first because they're so densely packed. They kind of all huddled together. But as you were harvesting, spaces opened up, and then they just were like, I got no friend. No lean on me when you're not strong. And that didn't happen. They couldn't lean on each other anymore. Their friendships were severed.
This is such a metaphor for life.
Right. And so they got, a lot of them got knocked down. We probably lost half of them. We did have an issue, I think, with a bulb.
Well, okay. So the first loss was the Darwins that got knocked over. We probably lost about 1,500 to that. And they would have been perfect and beautiful. And then the other one was we had 1 or 2 varieties, and I know it was just variety. It wasn't soil, it wasn't conditions.
Because it was one section.
It was one section. I mean,
it was like a 50 or less percent.
50% just didn't even germ. And it was strange because with tulip fire and other, or it's called bud blast or bud abort or whatever.
Bud blast.
Yeah, that's what it's called. The bud just blasts off. And nothing looked funky. it just didn't grow. But then the ones that did grow, I harvested and were beautiful. So it was like nothing or great. It wasn't like a bunch grew and then just some looked funky. So anyways, so that was a bummer because they should have done really well. So that was probably 500. So probably 2,000, maybe a little less than 2,000. Well, I did an exact number. It was a little less than 2,000. We just didn't get, which, I mean, that's not a great margin. I think when I did on Patreon, I remember I did a exact number countdown because I counted every stem we harvested. I know how much we planted. So I was able to do an exact percentage calculation of our expenses, our revenue, so then what our profit was and all of that. And our loss percentage was just higher than it should be. Tulips are high risk. They have slim margins. But this one was particularly large because you shouldn't have 30% loss. It should be 20.
But the reason that we felt good about them was because it wasn't our fault.
Yeah, we didn't have a big compost issue and then we were kicking ourselves and all of that. And
we grew nothing but premium bulbs this year. So we had one bulb that was a failure and one that clearly was a wind issue.
Yeah.
Which may not happen next year in the same way. So
yeah, because in year 2 when we were here,
which is kind of laughable to say in Oklahoma because
we're not going to have wind.
We always have winds, but it was pretty weird to just have
that wind issue in the year.
We didn't have 45 miles. We didn't just have like a weekend. It was a Friday and a Monday, which even the weatherman was like, "This is weird to have this high."
Yeah.
It is windy here, but we're talking 25 mile per hour with gusts of 45, not starting at the gust 45. Up to 70, so
it's crazy.
It was like a click up in terms of intensity. But that is, I mean, we are learning Oklahoma being an extreme weather climate with lots of ups and downs. So there is a high risk, and this will kind of be the theme of growing here through our spring review.
Volatility
is the volatility of our climate can lead to some significant impacts.
Yeah, we had shade cloth on. In March.
I tried to
we did windbreak boxes.
I put some more rebar in and I tried to get some
it helped.
Wood boards to try to
some.
shelter them. And we would do tunnel something or other with them, but you kind of have this weird thing with tunnels where tulips want the cold, so you don't want to cover them, but then in the spring you want to protect them from the winds.
Yeah. So we're going to probably plant about a similar number next year, but then hoping to not have, we're going to plant the same amount-ish next year and then hope to bring our loss margins down a bit more to be more 15, 20% rather than pushing 30%. And then that'll be, a couple $1,000s more in sales for us. But the cooler worked out wonderfully. I harvested every single thing I could get that wasn't destroyed, and we sold every tulip. We never composted a stem. So it's clear that we can sell tulips here. There are ways that we can grow them here. So for now, it will continue to be a yes crop for us, even though it can be higher risk, both in performance, the bulb problem that wasn't our fault, and then climate, which also can be tricky.
Yeah, I always say the unique thing about Oklahoma and tulips is we get them at the end of March. So
yeah, the third week of March is when tulips start to bloom for us, and then it really gets going the last week of March. So it launches our season.
And it's actually been pretty consistent now for 3 years. That
third week
of March, they're pushing fast, and you're starting to harvest.
And I was done 2.5 weeks later.
Yeah, it's like a 2.5 to 3 week season.
It's all I do is harvest, strip leaves, put in cooler.
But I'll add the audible here, which we skipped when we did our show notes earlier. Is the cooler.
Yeah, you can talk about it. You built it. So.
Was a big success this spring. So despite all our problems, and I'll probably recap it. Yeah. You could stuff a bunch of flowers in there.
So nice.
And it just worked really well. It was a mess with your bulb-on tulip process. It was an absolute mess. Just
organized.
Dirt everywhere.
No, I was organized.
Just compost, soil. I can't call it dirt. It's soil.
I was very organized.
You were organized. It was just a messy organization.
Yeah.
Because the bulbs were left on and
but it was primo cooler. Next flower is anemones. Anemones. This was our second year growing anemones. I loved them last year.
Well, they were an experiment last year that you had good success pre-selling, probably about $1,000 worth.
Yeah, true. I just enjoyed them, is what I should say.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. They were very bright, colorful, early. Like do they beat?
They technically beat tulips, but they start.
No, do they beat whatchamacallits?
Daffodils.
Daffodils?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like your first, like daffodils are always what everyone says is the first sign of spring, but like anemones seem to be actually the first.
Yeah.
They just aren't natural. You can't naturalize them because they have to be protected.
They're not landscape.
Because daffodils wait till they just start popping up and you don't have to do anything.
Right.
But anyways.
Yeah. So our problems with anemones this year will be the problem of everything in our tunnel, which is namely
wet, bog.
Yeah, so the like Cliff Note summary is we got record snow in January. 10
inches.
10 inches, which for us is not that much. Don't laugh if you're in Michigan, whatever.
No, for us it is a lot.
Oh yeah, sorry. I meant it's not a lot for most people. Like people in the north will be like 10 inches is like a week of snow for us. But it was crazy for us. And
combine that with clay soils.
Clay soil, it melted. And
slowly.
then never stopped raining in February. So the ground had 10 inches to absorb of melted snow.
Well, we had another snowy event with several inches of ice pack. And then we had rain. And then
so it just
didn't.
Yeah. I mean, our tunnel was flooded. And so everything got drowned in February. And then it dried out a little bit in March. But
right when we needed the sunflowers to start germinating.
Yeah, but the problem was, like, once you stress plants, they have a hard time recovering to their fullest. So even though it started to dry out a bit in March, because they had gone through like 4 or 5 weeks of trauma, they kept growing, but it was clear that they were just never going to hit their full potential. And so some things like outright died, but more so things they just were stunted. The foliage was small, which means they didn't have as much energy to push taller stems and quality blooms and as many stems. So we had some rotting with the anemones from the January issue.
Yeah, some didn't even push at all.
Right. Yeah. And then they just never really got full and abundant and longer stems. And so I just ended up leaving a lot in the tunnel because it just was too short to work with, even with some of the jars we were using. It just was. It
actually became a topic of argument because I'd go in the tunnel and I would say, those look like beautiful anemones. And you'd be, yeah, but like, look at how far the collar has stretched.
Good memory.
Because you want that little ring of leaves to only be an inch or less from the bud.
Yeah.
But like they were like several inches, so it's clearly had been doing it. Like the nice thing about, well, hello there. The thing about anemones is that they actually last a long time.
Yeah.
They start pushing their little satellite dish.
Yeah, you'd walk
and then they just keep growing and growing in the satellite dish.
And you'd be like, why aren't you cutting
There'd be these 18-inch tall anemones, but like the collar was like 6 inches down, and you're like, I can't sell those because they won't last long.
If I cut that by the next day, like the petals would have shattered off. Like it would have been.
Right, and I'd just be like, it blew my mind because I was just like, they look great, they looked healthy, and they were tall, but you were just like, I can't sell those.
Yeah. So
your average like produce farmer would have had no problem selling them.
Probably.
With no standards.
Right.
Sorry, inside joke.
So the main thing with anemones was rot, and then we just had a lot of waste because I couldn't use, a handful of them. They just weren't great quality.
Yeah, our tunnel is a very specific microclimate where it's like row 1 is actually our driest row, and literally the water on our property flows between rows 2 and 3. And on 2 years ago, we had a banger ranunculus anemone crop. We planted almost all our ranunculus in row 1.
Yeah.
So it's the driest row. We also had a very dry February, so it was great because we had to actually irrigate.
We were in full control in the
we dialed the irrigation as we needed it. We didn't have to worry about the way the water flowed on the property. We didn't have any snow of any significance whatsoever. So I mean, like, We had this time the ranunculus and the anemones were in rows 2 and 3 because we're trying to rotate, but those are the worst rows
I know.
in our
It's just
tunnel.
a
So
river. It was just a river. We'll just put some videos and pictures on the screen so you guys can see the flowing river that was our walkway.
yeah, so it's like it was a 1-2 punch at
Yeah.
best. And then we had a weed problem, but we'll talk about that when we have ranunculus.
Yeah, so the anemones is like they're really beautiful. They come fairly early. They produce a lot of stems. They're more heat tolerant. Our customers enjoyed the bright colors. It was a very unique flower to them, so it offered a lot of chatter. Those posts on social media got a lot of attention. I think ultimately people came to the flower stand for tulips and ranunculus, not for anemones. So there's a chance we might not grow them next year and just allocate more room for ranunculus. But I like anemones, and it bummed me out that that they didn't work out as great for us this year because of the rain problems. But next flower is ranunculus, and
you give the recap since I've
I mean the everything in the tunnel had the water problem. So just like assume the ranunculus also drowned. Another problem we had this year that we did not have last year was chickweed. There was
a surprise.
Yeah, there was chickweed last year, but it was not as much. And our plants grew a lot bigger, faster, more abundantly the first year that we had our tunnel. And I think around the time the chickweed really wanted to start going, a lot of the soil was shaded out. And so it had to, the couple of them had to work really hard, to break through. But because things were so stunted and so stressed and were smaller, the chickweed just had all this bare soil to work with. And so this was before the true drowning had happened, and Eric and I still had hopes and dreams that things were going to be fine. We spent so many hours in there weeding, trying to get on top of the chickweed. And the way we planted and stuff, we tried to use tools and to be efficient about it, but the infestation was so aggressive, and it was fairly hard to determine the new growth from the chickweed. And so with our tools and stuff,
we couldn't really use wire
weeders
hose.
And stuff.
We borrowed our neighbor's, what's the company? The seed company, Johnny Seeds.
Yeah.
He had a special tool, but it was so fine.
We were chopping off the new growth of the ranunculus, and we have kids, so we were paying them to help us weed, and it was a mess. And so we didn't have that our first year. So next year we'll probably do a video about our tunnel plan for next year and everything, and talk about in more specificity how we plan to address a lot of these problems. But we're going to try to do a bit of an experiment of putting the same crop in different scenarios, whether it's just bare soil like we normally would, or perhaps a raised bed. Perhaps try using some different landscape fabric products and just see what produces the best plant for the lowest labor cost, because weeding all winter along with frost clothing, tunnel management, fertilizing, pest management, irrigate, all these things, we have to bring that labor down. And weeding is one where we should get to the point where we're barely weeding. We're just spot treating is what we should aim for.
Yeah, I will emphasize we had a perfect storm of a lot of factors this year, including our latest child.
We can't, the baby.
So, we had a newborn, and so our attention to detail was a bit strained.
Was it because we were not sleeping? We planted the ranunculus out when I was 4 weeks postpartum.
Right.
With baby. And
the first year we did ranunculus, you planted them all.
All of them.
This year I had to do it a lot along with the kids. I think you did some.
I did some. I got really tired because...
The reason I'm bringing that up now is that I saw that chickweed starting at the top of row 2, and I thought in my head we should probably cover it while the ranunculus is still germinating.
Because it takes 2 weeks to sprout, typically.
Yeah, it's 2-3 weeks for it to start putting its little tender foliage up, but the chickweed was there. It was pretty mature, and so I thought in my head, but then 3 weeks went by, and we're getting up 3-4 times a night.
On a good
rotating.
night.
Yeah, on a good night. I mean, he was getting up every hour, you know, early on. So like we're tired.
Tired.
But then like we swapped labor. But like you do make these decisions on farms regardless of your kid's situation, where you kind of, it gets you when you're like, I'll do something later. A farm operation is such an encouragement to plod. Like, don't wait for tasks to build up. And I let that happen this fall instead of like getting out there. Should have put some 4-foot strips of landscape fabric on it to just starve the light.
We could have used the wire weeder super effectively.
Maybe
because before it.
Yeah, I don't know. Our soil makes it hard to work that wire weeder on the surface, and they're only 2 inches down. So maybe you could have scored the surface.
They sprouted, maybe.
I think if we work on better beds with like a lot more heaping, mounding soils, and then when you plant, like it's a much looser like fill that you can do a wire weeder on the top, probably would have worked, but because it was wet, so it quickly condensed after the till. So you couldn't wire weed. It was incorporated into the clay soil right away. So like clumpy clay soil doesn't move well. So I mean, like, it wasn't easy to work with. So we had to get little fingers and just pluck chickweed up. And we were doing it like every week, just like picking a section and plucking out, which probably pulled a ton of soil out too. I mean, it was just like a joke.
It was a clown
this year. So I mean, I was shocked we got anything, to be honest.
That's the thing. It's like we grew them really beautifully. We know how to grow them. We know that we can grow them. So we're going to try again next year and troubleshoot.
But you still got beautiful blooms. They just ended up being really short.
Yeah, we got some really short ones. So I had to do jars, which if you've watched our channel, you know my hatred of jars. But, you know, sometimes you just have to sell stems. So we did jars and they sold out. They
sold all the jars.
People want the wraps, but the jars were beautiful. Obviously not as efficient and all of that, but the jars were beautiful. We were able to sell some stems. You know, ended up being profitable from like the cost of the corms standpoint. Obviously, if you added,
I think we sold enough from what we harvested to recoup, probably with a little bit, but like, if we're to be honest, we didn't pay ourselves for the labor of the ranunculus.
So that's where it like dies.
It would have been such a minor, like a waitress wage, like a $2.35 an hour.
There were no tips being distributed.
I told her maybe we should put a pity jar out in the flower stand and say, like, we've had a tough year, throw us a bone, but that felt unprofessional.
We're like,
people get annoyed at the tip culture, so
we should put that on our iPad. They're just like, do you want to leave a tip?
Leave a 10%, 15%.
People would be like, no, stop it. So we love ranunculus. Our customers go bananas for ranunculus. It is very profitable for us if a million things don't go wrong at once. So we're going to go ranunculus again next year. We're going to grow a bit more ranunculus because we think that we do have the market to sell more, be open longer on Saturdays, not sell out so quickly. And so I'm really excited about that. Now that we've grown them twice, I'm also narrowing in a bit more of like the varieties and the colors that I really like and what look beautifully. So that's what we've ordered, plus some new ones to experiment, because I'll be honest, you look at the catalog and you're like, I want to grow that one. We also are going to experiment. We budgeted for this, but we bought, I think you've forgotten this because we made the decision in April, but we bought one of the really expensive tissue culture ranunculus ones. I think the variety is Colony something. And they're like the $1.50 corm kind of price, maybe even like $2, that are the like florist, super fancy wedding, like the most beautiful concentric giant ones. I bought like one bag worth from Ownings because I just want to see. I want to see, like, is it really noticeably different that makes the cost understandable? Or is it kind of like, oh, they're nice, but these are sufficient sort of things. Plus, it's fun to see things. And so if those go well, and I'm probably going to super baby that section, we'll show you guys next spring. But I'm excited about that one. I think it's Colony is the...
Which reminds us also on the tulip front, we're planting more doubles.
Oh yeah, we're gonna plant more doubles next year than we have in the past. The reason
Because they came later.
Yeah.
And they were almost like the perfect height. They weren't as tall as the Darwins, but they weren't short.
Yeah.
So, but like they held up to the winds pretty well.
Yeah. But the big reason was they were later, and so it helped spread out our season more instead of like all in a hot second.
All right.
Okay. Next, those are our 3 big spring flowers.
I'll do some recap of my thoughts on spring when we get to the big general wave tops. We can talk about the other.
Okay, I'll keep checking. Then we have a couple more. We don't grow too many varieties. Next was snaps. We grew November planted Madam Butterfly in the tunnel, and then I succession planted for May and June and beyond in our field. But our tunnel planted snapdragons, tunnel snaps, are absolutely beautiful. The Madam Butterflies did beautifully in the tunnel. I grew Madams in the field last year and I didn't like them. They were thin and wispy and lame, but I put them in our tunnel this year and they were giant and beautiful and ruffly, and I really enjoyed them way more than the field version. The problem was, and this isn't like something completely in my control, but the timing was off. I think I need to plant them a bit earlier. They bloomed basically after it was like the worst possible week. They bloomed after Easter, but before Mother's Day, when we kind of have a lull in what's blooming because the peonies and larkspur haven't started yet. The ranunculus and tulips are over. And so I just kind of had like a couple hundred snaps and literally nothing else going on. So that timing was a bit of a bummer. And then also,
which is crazy because we had a very close period of time.
It was, yeah, but it was
Easter
literally like
Day.
April 28th or whatever.
Well, like the problem is like this year that was so close together that usually there's such peaks around Easter and Mother's Day that like people spend a lot of money on flowers, and then like the interstitial Sunday or two between those two holidays, like the days around, like the 2 weeks around those two holidays tend to be lower. They're still pretty good sales day for us, but if you just bought like $100 in flowers on Easter and then like 2 weeks later is Mother's Day, that's when your snaps were ready, was like that in between Sunday, and people were just like,
we're tired.
And then like you said, you didn't have
anything else.
But like that was the other issue with our spring wave top, and we'll talk about this with larkspur and bupleurum, was that everything this year has been later. So like everything in the timing was, and this wasn't just our own testimony, you talked to Allison.
Everyone in the area.
It was just like everything is not showing up on time. Even our sunflowers.
Everything
was super late compared to the year. And like we can't, I think it was a soil temperature issue. I think that big snowpack really chilled deep down into the soil and just like really slowed germ. It really slowed the maturation rate. It's that whole microclimate that happens in the soil. And so timing everything was very different. And like this is the fun part of farming, I think, but also the frustrating part.
It's not in our control.
Every year you have to dial it in. And like you're always adjusting and chasing the prior year's problems, but then the new year problems sneak up on you.
Yay! What's
part of the curse of the fall?
Yeah,
that's just like you will toil with the soil.
Ooh, good rhyme.
Yeah.
So I will grow snaps again next year in the tunnel. I think I'm going to plant more of them and a more continued stagger of succession planting, so that hopefully I have kind of like a month worth, maybe 3 weeks worth of tunnel snaps, so that if things are a little bit later or there's a little bit of flex, I have more going on to help hit those targets. Instead, I planted, I think, 2 trays the same day. And so that's what I had. Like I had 1 succession and that was that. So I need to, expand it a bit more to have a wider net to be successful. And then the problem we continue to have in our tunnel, and I think this is going to be like, I would like this to be a winter project of ours, is to research more aphid control in our tunnels. That tends to be the main pest for us in our tunnel. We don't get any aphids on our snaps outside. We got thrips this year on our snaps in the field, but thrips I think are a little bit easier to manage on snaps than aphid problems. And so we just got to figure out how we're going to
Again, some of that is like a attention to detail. and not deferring. And also some of it is a bit of like we were getting so much rain that it was even hard, even though the tunnel is covered, of like getting out and like getting the chemical mix, the pyrethrin.
I don't know about you, but like mentally, even though I know the amount of water is not that much on each plant, when you're looking at things drowned, it was really hard mentally to be like, and now I'm going to spray them with water, because you're like, they're so
right.
red.
I mean, we didn't.
I didn't fertilize.
You weren't as fertilizer intensive as 2 years ago, and like again, this was unique because we had a baby, and like we were just very tired parents.
This is a survival year.
It was like, let's do what we can to survive and keep the market going, the sales going. So a lot of our stuff was offset by friendly farms and buying local.
Yeah.
From a couple of farms in the area.
I'm looking at said baby on monitor.
Making sure he's asleep.
He's kind of swirling around right now. So next flower that was in our tunnel, the last flower in our tunnel was campanula. This is the first time we've grown campanula. We bought it wholesale from a friend last year.
I'm just laughing now because I'm going to talk about another attention to detail issue. And you guys are going to be like, are you professional farm?
No, they're going to be like, what do you guys even
amateurs
do?
Go to our Patreon.
Stop it. We worked so hard and we were so tired. We have 5 children. We're doing our best. But we bought campanula wholesale from my friend who grows in Tulsa, and they were beautiful and they were perfect for Mother's Day. And so last year. And so I wanted to grow it ourselves, especially because we had a tunnel. So we planted them in November, and assuming no horrible weather problems, I did everything correctly with them, like proper spacing, proper planting timing. They would have bloomed beautifully for Mother's Day with their progression. They just drowned. And then I think we were just so depressed in the tunnel. I'll be honest with you. It was just hard being in there because it was so boggy and mucky and bugs and things were so stressed that we just weren't on top of tasks like we normally would be. And so we were a bit late in getting them netted, and
Well, I mean, so they were tough. They were probably in the worst possible position. So it was our row 3 at the end, which pools up with water. So the fact that they didn't outright die was impressive. So I think we'll have greater success with them mitigating how the wet climate was, because they actually, some of them started to bloom stunted, but then 2 sections of it seemed to push through, and they got really tall, and they were looking great.
So next year,
but then April, we got hit with 20 plus inches of rain, and like we knew we needed to net them to support them.
But they were already starting to die from the bottom.
No, well, yeah, but like their top was tall one day, and then like 2 days later, the top started to candy cane over.
It was drowning.
And they were just like, help.
Like, we can't do it.
I don't even think netting would have helped them.
No, they wouldn't.
But I mean,
they need to be netted, but it wouldn't have saved anything.
Yeah, they probably still would have curled over. But they went from like, you were like, I think I'm going to get a lot of campanula. And then literally 3 days later, she came and she's like, they're all gone. I don't think I can use any of them. And I'm like, what? You just told me.
I was so hopeful.
If you want to start flower farming in the hopes that it's like a Zen experience where you're just like low stress, it is a testing thing to be a farmer. And like, it does shape it sanctifies you.
We do feed off each other, because when I'm acting like everything's horrible, Eric's like, no, it's going to be
I think it's positive. And then when you're like perky, I'm like, it's terrible.
I hate it.
Yeah, we do kind of do the
Which
the
is probably
inverse.
good, because if we were both depressed, we probably wouldn't keep going. But campanula. So next year we're going to grow up campanula again. I'm going to copy the same thing I did.
The timing would have been good.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat. I liked the varieties. I liked everything. We just need to do moisture control, and then we're obviously get the netting on much sooner than we would have. And we would have done that, I think, if everything else wasn't a bummer. The 2 field flowers that we grow in spring, and this is our 3rd year with them, was larkspur and bupleurum. We grow those because they bloom around Mother's Day. That's our biggest flower holiday. That's also the hardest time for us to have flowers. So if it blooms during that time, we need to be growing it to use in our bouquets with our peonies and campanula during that early May, mid-May time frame. I don't really have any complaints. When we first did Bupleurum, we realized they really don't like wet feet, and so they struggled and were stunted, so we put them at the higher end of a bed this year that had better drainage. They were beautiful, they were huge and straight, and I cut every single stem I could. The larkspur was happy. Like Eric said, everything was about 2 weeks late or so, which for the larkspur, it worked a bit in our favor because last year, larkspur really did its main flush like the week before Mother's Day. But this year I had many more like perfectly ripe, perfectly mature stems to cut from. So we're going to do those again next year. I haven't decided on quantities, but we're going to keep growing them. Not because they're like the most fabulous flower ever, but they're really important fluff and color to complement our very expensive peonies.
I love larkspur, Bupleurum.
Eric doesn't like Bupleurum. I like Bupleurum. But
you did a stagger on the Bupleurum in the hopes that you could stretch them, but ironically, we didn't need a stretch this year
right?
Because everything was late. So you had a whole section of the row, like a third of the row that was succession planted of the Bupleurum, and like it didn't need it. We didn't need a delay.
Yeah. No, we didn't.
So I mean, well, I guess we'll have to talk if you're going to stagger them again, and maybe next year won't be a 2-week delay.
All the things we can't control, right?
Right.
Okay, the last spring flower is peonies. We planted...
Man, I keep forgetting about them.
I know. Well, we planted a big field.
It's like last year we forgot
Stop it. We planted a big field.
Broke my back.
Broke Eric's back. It was in a low spot on our property. A lot of them drowned, but more of them came back than we thought. And the ones that came back were like beautiful. Technically, you're not supposed to cut on year 2 peonies. I did cut some because I just was so excited about them. But next year, if we can keep them weed-free-ish and well irrigated once it finally stops raining here all summer, I'm going to be able to cut on them next year, and I'm really excited about that. We are going to expand our peony field, but we're going to put it in a bit better of a drainage situation and kind of like fix those problems a bit to hit the peony plant numbers that we'd like to have. But we bought wholesale from local friends this year. Again, it's really expensive to buy peonies wholesale and get a profit on them, but it was so important to complement the other flowers that we were growing and to have a big Mother's Day weekend, so that was an important purchase. The way I did our recipes, I was able to make it profitable, but if we grow our own peonies, the profit margin will be a lot higher. So that's what we're going for next year. Easter and Mother's Day, those are the big spring holidays. It was frustrating having Easter be so late in the calendar for us because
and close to Mother's Day.
Yeah, and close to Mother's Day because tulips were completely done and ranunculus were on their way out. Even if we had banger ranunculus, they would have been on their way out with how late Easter was. So that was a bit of a challenge. We had a great Easter. We sold,
200-ish.
Almost 200. It was great. Wonderful. We just are starting to push ourselves to have goals of being open like all day on a holiday and not have such a quick sellout so that we can really capture as many possible sales as we can to help with our numbers. Because we're a part-time operation. We're not open, our max growing season. And so we really need to try to maximize when people want to spend money on flowers that we have them and they're available. We're not closed up after 90 minutes sort of thing. So we survived Easter.
Well, it is the Sown 7A Southern grower. It's our fox in the hole or ace in the hole. What do you call it? Fox in the hole? Ace in the, whatever. Northern growers, they don't have flowers on Easter.
Not typically, no. Not when it's an earlier date. They had
maybe late April.
They had some this year.
So
ranunculus.
Like last year, it was the end of March. Yeah, we had tons of tulips.
It was like as early as it could be last year, and then this year it was like as late as
it
could
in April.
Be. But next year,
so we have to maximize our Easter here.
Yes. Well, next year is like Goldilocks Easter. It's like perfect date for tulips and ranunculus if we can do our job. So I will be optimistic that Easter next year will be really, really good. So we had a great Easter.
We want to go for like 300 plus bouquet holidays.
Yeah, we need to start aiming for like $10,000 holiday weekends.
We may not get to 10,000 next year, but that'd be a cool video.
Good try. Our kids are getting older and more helpful, so maybe we'll see. And then Mother's Day, we sold our most bouquets we've ever sold on Mother's Day this year. It was wonderful. If we had stayed open, we could have sold more, but we again thankfully didn't turn anyone away who had waited in our long car line. We were able to kind of have a lull to close everything up and say that we sold out and not disappoint anyone, because that would bum me out. But Mother's Day is just hard. I bought every single wholesale stem I could from all of my friends around town, plus what we had. Made everything I could, and we sold out. So we had great holidays. We just continue to press a goal, being that we can be open all day and not.
Surprisingly, we sold more on those days than we did last year, but we didn't quite have the same lines.
Oh yeah, we were open for longer, because we didn't have like as much of a.
It was a little more stressful for you because we'd have some like little lulls
where no one was.
And we were still like, oh my gosh, nobody's coming to buy. But then like a flush would come through, and then another flush, and then another flush. It was very bursty. There was a decent line that went up the road, so we still got some of that great, exciting drone footage. It's really encouraging. It's like a thrill.
But it's hard when you're standing in a stand with like 75 bouquets and there's no one there, and you're like, what have we done?
Right.
But no, we sold out.
But you had just sold 75 in like 10 minutes.
True.
And then you were like, I have 75 left and nobody's here. But then they kept like.
That's when you tell me to just calm down.
Yeah. Well, we've got those videos. You guys have seen her panics and then the calm down afterwards. So. Okay.
So just concluding spring thoughts. They probably don't want to hear us rant about rain anymore, but that's kind of the main theme of our spring. Truly was drowning.
So we're thankful for, local farms like Slick Chick Farms in Tulsa, and Sunshine and Stems, and
Hall & Co.
Yeah, Holland and Company. They don't really have, I guess they probably have their Instagram accounts and stuff like that, but they came through for us to allow us to keep our operation going. So thank you if you happen to watch this video. We were able to continue to push beautiful local flowers to people in Riders County, and that was excellent, and that was fantastic to be able to lean on when we're. That's the theme. What? Lean on me when you're not strong.
I leaned on our
just like the tulips.
Friends.
But we got some great backup help there.
They were struggling all too. They had all the same problems we had because of the rain and the temps and everything. So they were antsy to sell every stem that they could harvest. So I felt like I was helping them too by just buying everything from each other, because they had a rough time. They had a lot of loss too.
Right.
I mean, I love spring flowers the most. I think it feels a bit stressful because it's a combination of like we put everything on video with YouTube. So it feels a little bit exposing, especially when things don't go great. And then we've built a wonderful market here of people that really love our flowers. And so it's stressful when you want to try to deliver and something goes wrong, or you can't, you don't have what you'd like. But then when you do nail it and it is like, oh my gosh, you have a tunnel full of beautiful ranunculus like we did last year, it's really exciting and you want to try to do it again. So this year was a bit of a bummer, even though I think we salvaged it and we came out profitable at the end. I'm excited for a redo, which is the nice thing about farming is we get a redo. And so I'm excited to hopefully correct some of these issues that we can control and have a really great spring.
It was very cathartic to reset the tunnel and get all the plants out.
The rip out day was so nice.
But yeah, we're probably moving the tunnel. So that's going to be a big fall project.
Yeah.
To get it out of that zone.
So I hope that was.
We're kind of like blackpilling everybody. But
no, we're not blackpilled. That's what I meant by like you get another try.
Well, I think that the number of flowers we purchased is probably, I don't know, it's at least 2x of last year, because we still bought peonies last year.
Buying wholesale, yeah.
We sold more this spring than we did last spring. So yeah. I mean, like it's
progress.
It was.
Yeah, we sold way more on Easter.
Our revenue is higher this year than it was last year.
It just could have been even higher.
Right. Yeah, we could have probably sold at least 100 plus more bouquets on both those days. And like that's kind of what we keep mulling over is like, how do we have more? And also like since you're the primary bouquet maker, the wrap maker,
Yeah.
like that's it's probably going to be like you make the first 200 and then you just press while somebody else is manning the stand.
Also, our 11-year-old, she's probably going to be trained
How to make wraps.
Start making more of them.
Yeah, well, maybe she can become fast and efficient, and
yeah,
she can keep bringing out buckets of.
I think she's ready to start that process.
Which would be super cool.
Yeah, it would be cool.
It's funny now because like when we have flower conversations, our 11-year-old will be like, she's listening.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I didn't know that about that flower. Oh, that's interesting. Like she's starting to pay attention. Like she acts super cool. Like she's not interested, but she's like kind of like leaning in now and she's paying attention and saying, oh.
Yeah, what'd she say today? She's like, well, you're not supposed to net sunflowers.
We were talking about tulips.
Oh, tulips. That's right. Yeah,
because we're thinking, can we net tulips to help with the wind?
And we were like, no.
Like, would that work? You were like, well, it probably would work, but it would be hard to harvest.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to like reach down in the little 6x6 grid. And
she's listening. They get paid for their efforts, so they also have incentives to.
Yeah, because half the reason we do the farm is to teach how to use the land well and to teach our kids hard work, and how to run a business. You know, some of that attention to detail that comes with it. As they get older, they'll just be used to it. Yeah. So hopefully they'll be able to take that and launch their own businesses one day, or take over this business. So we'll at least one of them.
Yeah. Well, if you made it to the end of this video, 2 things. 1, if you want to deep dive any of this anymore, we'd love to have you over on Patreon. We have like 150 members now at this point, which is really great. We have like a chat thread where we chat, we collect questions and do Q&As, and then we do additional videos. And then we also give like a lot of specifics that maybe weren't included necessarily in a lot of our YouTube videos of like real numbers and varieties and crop plans and all of that. So we'd love to have you if you guys are interested in that. And then second, we haven't done a secret word at the end of a video in a long time. And this is a long video, so I think it deserves a secret word. I think it should be a rain cloud. Because that was our summer review theme.
Followed by a rainbow.
Oh yeah, I could do a cloud and a rainbow because we're not going to black pill. Those were our 2 wave tops. Right. Let's try again. And there was a lot of rain.
God's promises are good.
Yes. So, but thank you for watching, you guys. I appreciate you guys that watch us and have followed us for a while and are on this journey with us that we do try to make very public and honest of what goes well and what we struggle with. So, bye guys.
Bye.